Good morning, everybody. This is Pastor Rick, and this is October 17th, 2022, here with the Broadman word for today. Hope you're having a marvelous day in the Lord. Sure is a beautiful day outside. It's not quite as cold as they said it was going to be, and looks like we are headed for some colder temperatures, though, so we'll all get excited about that. Everybody's favorite. It's that time of year. Listen, I wanted to talk to you today about light, interestingly, since we're ever increasingly having shorter amounts of daylight on any given day. But this kind of light is different. It's the light that's inside you because of the glorification of Jesus Christ in you and you in Him. It's an incredibly important relationship because the victory that was won over so many things at Calvary on the cross and then through the resurrection were struggles and pain, but it was the light of Jesus Christ that ultimately remained after all of the darkness, after all of the schemes of men failed, after the politics and the cultural nonsense of the day and the money and all the things that were at play that eventually ended up with Jesus on the cross were all part of God's necessary plan for us to eventually be redeemed by Jesus' blood and then able to be come before Him as righteous and to be adopted heirs of His kingdom. That was all necessary. But it was Jesus' victory over all of those things that we share in. We share in that victory, which enables us to do all of those other things that I just mentioned about with our Father. In the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 5, it has a very simple statement. Let me read it to you. It says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." So, despite the worrisome times that we live in, all the anger, strife, confusion, persecution that we see, particularly against people of God, we shall not be overcome. The light that shines from us, in us, and through us is not going to be overcome by any amount of darkness. In fact, we pierce the darkness, according to John. And your translation might say shine in the darkness. That's fine. It doesn't matter. It's the same principle. And it is that presence of the light of Jesus Christ in us that creates a place where darkness cannot exist. Think about it. If there is light, there cannot be dark. And so if you're there shining your light of Christ into a given situation, then there cannot be dark, and dark cannot overcome it. There's no other way for dark to exist unless light retreats. So what does that mean for us? Carrying this responsibility, carrying this light, the light of Christ around with us. Well, it means that we have to shine it everywhere we go. It doesn't mean you're not going to have a down day, or I try not to think about there even being a possibility of a bad day because God lets you have it, so it's got to be good. But we all know what we mean when somebody says they've had a bad day. And the situation then for us is how do we choose to react to the circumstances of the world? Because anything that attempts to impede your joy in Christ, to get in the way of the hope that you have in the day of the Lord and the ultimate reign of Jesus Christ over all, a new heaven and a new earth, anything that tries to impede that is darkness. So what are you going to do then? Well, the answer is both simple and hard. The simple thing is not to think of the world in worldly terms. Think of it in terms of heavenly existence, because that's what we're supposed to identify with. We're no longer citizens of the world. We were bought, paid for, and brought out of that condition. We're now in a righteous condition, and we now have a new home, heaven. Your address switched from a worldly address that would have led to ultimate death, and then a second death being cast into hell to a life and an address of a place that's eternal, with life that will never end. So that important change happened. We then need to, wherever we are, have that in our hearts and our minds, that we are in fact God's representatives. We are eternal, and the darkness cannot overcome us, so we can approach any person, any situation with confidence. It doesn't mean that we need to be dumb. There's times and places where you need to be cautious, where you need to take care of yourself. There's bad places in the world. There's bad places in Akron, in Cuyahoga Falls, in any city you care to name. And so you don't need to just go around being dumb. The gospel doesn't command you to do that. But it does command you to approach these situations, wherever you might be and whoever you might be around, without fear or trepidation. Because you are an eternal being. Your light will not ever extinguish. Your light will not ever be overcome by darkness. And no matter what might happen to you, it will fulfill the good purposes of God in some way, a way that we may not understand completely, may not ever get to understand until we're face to face with Jesus and we get to perhaps ask the question. But it doesn't matter if we understand or not. We know that God is a God of truth, and that He is a God of provision, and that we're going to be cared for and taken care of regardless of what may happen to us here. So that then is the difference maker. That's where we find our peace, and that's where we find our joy, and that's how we shine our light into whatever darkness we might be surrounded by, because we know that in that light we exist.